What is up, Planeswalkers 36, back with some more Magic the Gathering Arena. Today I think we finally are able to showcase the Mono Blue Tempo deck. Now this deck has been giving me some difficulty, but that said, I'm not very good at playing or making aggro decks. And this is sort of an aggro deck. Now when I say tempo, what I mean is this deck wants to put out a couple of easy to defend creatures really early on, and then make it so your opponent just cannot do anything else the rest of the game, and you slowly just whittle them down. If any of you if any of you know Modern and Legacy, a Delver deck, the quintessential Delver deck is a tempo deck where you resolve an early Delver or potentially a young Pyromancer, and then you protect it with removal spells and counter spells and other tempo value cards. So what we have here is our early creatures in Mist-Cloaked Herald, Siren Stormtamer, and Nightveil Sprite. Mist-Cloaked Herald can't be blocked, very valuable. Siren Stormtamer allows you to protect either yourself from being burned to death or one of your other creatures. And Nightveil Sprite, while it comes down later, does give you the ability to filter your draws. Now, this deck only runs 21 lands. You can still flood with the amount that you have potential for draw. You can still flood with 21 land, but I found that running 21 is kind of necessary to make sure you hit up to around your third land drop, because that's really what you want. Merfolk Trickster is a card that can help you just be a threat by itself, but often it comes down tapping something that's potentially in the air to allow us to swing in with the final points of lethal with our Siren or Nightveil Sprite. Exclusion Mage, very similar to our Merfolk Trickster, except it does not have flash, which means it is worse. It does, that said, get rid of a creature for an entire turn, but it costs 1 more mana, it doesn't have flash. Tempest Djinn is kind of our late game Hail Mary. Tempest Djinn very easily can get to a very large power point, but with the amount of removal running around, it often is just going to die, but it's still a strong card if you're able to attack with it. Curious Obsession is really the reason you're going to be running this deck. The dream, of course, is Mist-Cloaked Herald, equipped and attacking with Curious Obsession. Obsession allows you to just get a bunch of card draw, hold a bunch of answers up, and be able to just annoy the crap out of your opponent. Dive Down is great protection for your creatures. It gives them hexproof, and it gives them +0/+3, which allows them to block in some scenarios where you don't want to die. I'm running a single Blink of an Eye, and I found that it does help against those super late game threats, those Vraskas, the Doom Whisperers, those that ilk. It allows you to just give you a little bit more time, just another turn, and it, for what it's worth, you can draw a card with it, so it at least replaces itself as well. Chart, of course, is great in this deck. It kind of is a facsimile of Curious Obsession in that we attack for functionally free and are able to draw more cards than we otherwise would. And then, of course, we have some counter magic. We have 2 Spell Pierce, 3 Essence Scatter, and 4 Wizard Retort. We aren't running a ton of wizards, right? We have 10, but being able to just counter anything is great. Spell Pierce is very helpful when you're playing on curve. You want to disrupt them early and try and stabilize at that position and just attack them. So late game, this card is worse, but early game is really where you need the counter spells. In later game, you can have things like Dive Down. Essence Scatter, we just want to make sure certain key cards don't actually resolve. Chupacabra is a big hit to this deck. And of course, 21 Islands. I will show off the current sideboard that I have. However, I'm not going to play a best of 3 game because I just am not good at playing aggro decks. So, Sentinel Totems, these help with the Golgari matchups. Disdainful Stroke against the more control-y decks. Negates, once again, against the more control-y decks. When you're facing red, you're going to want to bring in some Diamond Mares. Diamond Mare also, it's a nice way to block, but if you start to stabilize against the red aggressive decks, you can actually just attack with Diamond Mare, and it works totally fine. 2 Sleeps, when you are in a kind of you wouldn't bring Sleep in against the red decks that use a lot of burn, but you might bring this in against the Boros decks, the tribal decks like Vampires and Merfolk. And then, of course, some Syncopates, once again, for the control decks, as well as against the graveyard matchups. Now, sideboarding is going to be relatively hard with this deck. What you'll typically do is, against the control decks, you're going to want to make your response suite a little bit more catered towards them. So, Essence Scatter, you can cut down a couple of these. You can probably cut down on things like Merfolk Trickster or Exclusion Mage because they're not going to be running as many creatures. And then adding those in against the aggro decks, you're now going to be the control deck, so you can possibly cut the heralds, possibly the blink of an eye because they're too slow, the later game counterspells like Wizard's Retort, and add in those things. So hopefully that explains what the deck is all about, and we can just showcase some things. 60-card decks typically have 23 to 27 lands. Well, we're running 21. Going up against Dr. Moralos? I don't know. This is not the best hand, especially since we're going second. You really want to be able to land a creature on turn 1, but we can flash in a Trickster on 2, and then hold up another Trickster as well as some protection on 3, so this is probably fine, potentially a little too slow. And that's one of the biggest reasons I don't like super linear aggressive decks. Some aggressive decks, you know, they don't have as much of a problem, but decks like this are very linear, and you really need to have things in a certain order in order to maximize the strength of your deck. Also, as I said, 21 lands, sometimes we still flood, but you kind of need the 21 lands to make sure, like as I said, this deck has to have a certain order, and you need the 21 lands to make sure you can play in that order. Spell Pierce, this is actually fine. Yeah, I think Spell Piercing this is fine. It gives them enough blockers that it's kind of annoying. We have another Trickster, so we're on the Trickster game. Looks like. Might see a Conclave Cavalier come out. Putting it down to 5 cards. We currently don't have a great way to draw, but we do have Tricksters enough to just pressure them a bit. But this being a token deck, that's going to be relatively hard. We really want... Also Colossus? Sure. We really want to be able to... get in there unblockable. So I'm actually very happy that we went ahead and countered that, because this would have been larger. Another dive down, sure. Another dive down, not really what we want to see. We want to start seeing Curious Obsession. Start being able to just out advantage our opponent. See what they have on 5 here. That is bad. Very, very bad. There isn't any point where you can flash this in to make it so they can't have an ETB ability. So. It's possible we can trade for that and use a dive down as well. We might as well. We don't expect our opponent to be on too much removal. So we're going to block here. And before damage, do some of this. And let damage happen. Now return. Wizard's Retort is like a turn too late. I'm actually going to attack with both and hope my opponent blocks. My opponent should not block here, but if they do, we can catch them really well with Merfolk Trickster. Darn. My opponent is smart. I said we might be able to catch one of them off guard. Song of Frailes, I think I'm fine letting happen. We really want to counter something that is going to impact the board immediately. And that is something that we don't want to deal with. So I might be able to ambush one of these 1/1s if they decide to attack. Yep. So I'm going to go ahead and flash this in. What I'm doing is making it so she no longer has the buff. And now I can block this and get a nice free trade. And deal 6 to my opponent on my following turn. Once again, Essence Scatter is kind of slow here. So yeah, as you can see, the fact that we, drew a little too few or too many lands, and we didn't have a way to get that card advantage, means that it's very difficult to maintain the pressure on our opponent. We're down to 1 card in hand, which is not necessarily going to be strong. Our opponent doesn't really need to attack here, to be honest. And once this becomes a... Actually, honestly, I do think my opponent was favored there. I'm not sure why they decided to concede, but I'll take it. On to the next game. this is Mono Blue Tempo. I didn't change the name because I've been playing with this darn deck for several days. And I hate it. Going against Sea Town Cliff. A lot of you might be saying, Eric's, why are you playing a deck you hate? Several reasons. It's, you know, it's a deck that's relatively cheap. I think the only rare in it is Tempest Djinn, right? It's a cheap deck, and it is effective at certain points in the game, right? Or at certain plans of attack. I'm just not good at those plans of attack. So this is a fine hand. We had a nice 1-drop into Hold Up, Essence Scatter, or Trickster, depending on what our opponent does here. We can just start hitting them in the air, depending on, of course, on what the deck is. Probably a Boros deck. When I say Boros, I mean like a Boros aggro deck, I should say. So, it's interesting include. And if our opponent plays something frightening on 3, we can go ahead and Essence Scatter it. If not, we can just wait and flash in a Trickster. We don't need to block the Trickster. Like, there's no reason for us to trade, really. See what you do. And we're going to go ahead and counter the Bugler. We don't want them having value here. And we have a Curious Obsession, which is very nice. So we're actually going to Curious Obsession this. And we're going to play out another Siren, which will protect our enchanted creature. So we get to draw a card. Very nice. And end the turn. We're not going to play this because we want to protect this. At this point, we have a creature that's going to give us card advantage, and all we want to do is make sure it doesn't die. Tajik, sure. So, I mean, Tajik is, you know, a problem in that I'm going to get attacked for 6 here. How dare you? Ow. No blocks. And next turn, I can flash in Trickster to block Tajik. Hold up Wizard's Retort as well. I'll go ahead and attack before I make a decision on whether or not I want to play the Mist-Cloaked Herald. Sure. No reason to retort that, I don't think. I think we just want to use the Stormtamer. Yeah, that's fine. So they functionally forced us to pay 1 and shocked our Stormtamer. So. This only hits legends. This is not legend. Alright, and we'll draw a card. Since we tapped that, we are going to play Mist-Cloaked Herald. Yeah. Because we aren't going to be able to hold up both of these anyway. So, and we will end. We might Trickster. So my opponent is playing correctly. I'm going to let them attack. I'm just trying to figure out if I want to Trickster this down. I'm worried about a removal spell. I think we have enough creatures still that doing this is fine. But I could be wrong. Let's go ahead and target this. So now we can't give it first strike. Yep. So I can go ahead and block this. And potentially kill it. Yeah, my opponent's looking at it, trying to give it first strike. Even if they gave it first strike in response, then this would have resolved and removed first strike from it. So now my opponent might not kill the Stormtamer. No, they're going to kill Stormtamer. Which is the correct decision. They could have left their Tajik alive, but I think what they did here was correct. And we don't have... So this is a wizard. So theoretically, if they cast something, we can go ahead and attack. The problem is, we're on a 15-turn clock, and they can kill us with that pretty easily. I could double block on this in order to kill it, and then follow up with a Mist-Cloaked Herald the following turn. I think that might be the actually best play, because our opponent is running low on resources. I hate when you attack first. I hate when you play well. I guess I could have just flashed this in to tap it before damage. Yeah, that was probably the better move. Yeah. Yeah, that was incorrect. I think I should have flashed this in earlier and made it just so it couldn't attack. If my opponent does try to cast a removal spell, then I can use Wizard's Retort on it. But as of right now, I couldn't. So I do want them to try and burn a creature so it survives. They choose not to. So do they have a good follow-up here? I'd say that's a pretty good follow-up. Yeah, we're basically dead. Make sure you don't Curious Obsession on the first turn it's in, because it counts that. Yeah, that's really unfortunate. Damn. That said, Tempest Djinn does allow us to potentially block. Chart, of course, does not help. So we are going to Tempest Djinn. And they could have removal for this. We block this all day because we don't want to die to a shock or a Fanatical Firebrand. Instigator, sure. All right, let's go ahead and attack. And let's chart a course. Well, we have Blink of an Eye. So we can shove the Phoenix back into their hand. I could have actually just done that. Yeah, that was a misplay on my part. If I Blink of an Eye this token now, then it wouldn't be able to come back. Whoops. And unfortunately, they can just recast the Phoenix. Yep. Alright, got another Tempest Djinn, so that's nice. Gonna hold up a Wizard's Retort. Have to block this. We keep drawing lands. We do this because we can. Unfortunately, there's nothing in our deck that can save us from all of this. I actually think that if we had bounced this properly, we probably would have won this game. But unfortunately, we didn't. That mistake lost us the game. Alrighty, on to the third game. We are up against Tenacity, I guess, is what they're trying to do. This is a great hand. We're going second. If we were going first, this would be better. But, I mean, this is pretty much turn one I mean, I'll just keep it there. We turn 1, Herald. Turn 2, Siren, to protect the Herald. Turn 3, Curious Obsession, and get some of that sweet, sweet value. Let's see. Alright, sure. Up against Golgari. No chance. See if they have the 3-1. They don't. They just have another supplier. A lot of suppliers early on. Alright. So we're going to go and play the Stormcaller because we want to protect our Herald. That is of the utmost importance right now. And next turn we're going to be able to play Land, Obsession, and another Stormtamer. Not blocking. I am relatively likely to win this race. Our opponent is already down to 3 cards. I mean, they're ramping. I would like to get a counterspell, like a normal counterspell as well. I'm going to go and do this. We might want to play another Siren, but we might not. We might want to hold up a counterspell that we might draw. I got a Tempest Djinn, so we will just go ahead and play another Stormtamer. This does play into a board wipe, but the Golgari decks tend not to be playing board wipes other than Finality, and we're a bit away from that, so sure. And Tempest Djinn is going to help with this as well. I assume they're going to put that on the bottom. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm winning this race easily. No blocks. I have good protection here. Tempest Djinn is great. We will play a land, and we're going to go ahead and attack first before we decide whether or not we want the Djinn. Nightveil Sprite. I think it's correct to just play Djinn here. Djinn's 4 power. Yeah. And at this point, we have 2 things we want to protect, so it's possible that one of them will die. But we're not too worried about that. And we're just going to sack a Stormtamer. We have another one in hand. Don't really care too much. Yeah. I guess we could have blocked, but I don't think it's actually terribly necessary, to be quite honest. Got a Wizard's Retort. Very helpful. With a Wizard's Retort, opponent's at 5. I guess I just want Exclusion Mage that. Oh, but then I can't retort. I think that's fine, actually. Just Exclusion Mage the Branchwalker. It'll end. Still have up our Stormtamer. Yep. Cool, cool. And as long as you have the Stormtamer up, your matchup against Green Black is pretty darn good. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and just say 3 games is fine. A nice short video. One of the reasons aggro is real great for people who, you know, I'm opening another one, darn it. Because I want to. The reason aggro is great for people who don't have too much time on their hands. They're able to just go ahead and play some aggro games, get a lot of games in. I'd like to thank Easy Mode, Dizzy Fam, Radberry, Kyoshin, Ox, Daniel, Flowerchild, Chow83, Zaraga, and Mad Goes Bad for their wonderful support over on Patreon. If you'd like to join them supporting the channel, it allows me to continue making the decks you guys want to see. You'll find links to that in the description below. I hope you enjoyed this look into a blue aggro deck. And if you did, go ahead and tap that like button, add a subscription to your mana pool, and cast a comment in the comment section down below. And until next time, I will be one.